This is about GitLab pods, and this is welcome our host, Josh.
Thanks, Sid, and thanks everyone for checking out our pods update for the week of August 24th. Fabian won't be able to join due to time zone, but he did provide a number of updates in the agenda, so we'll go through them as we can. First up, I have the first agenda item, which is I updated slide 2. This is based on feedback from Dylan that that decomposition doesn't necessarily increase blast radius, and that we can make further enhancements to kind of further isolate the CI workloads so that more workflows can work if the CI service is down. But I did try and call out on slide 3, which is a new one, that the isolation capabilities of pods are more advanced because obviously if all of CI is down, that's a big problem for all of our customers with.
Yeah, I think we could say we're not helping blast radius with decomposition. Look, our GitLab CI is so heavily used. If that goes down, it's like, I don't think it's reducing the blast radius.
GitLab's effectively down for most of our customers. So agree there. And so this is a much superior solution for isolation. So did that. Fabian has number 4, which is he's been thinking about how to get better data on the prevalence and frequency of usage of cross-pod workflows. Basically, a lot of the difficulty in pods is these workflows. And so if we can refine our understanding of which of these are truly important and which ones we need to solve, that can help us reduce scope, reduce complexity, and also, come to a quicker conclusion on, like what are the key architectural problems we have to solve. So he's trying to get some analysis so we can move beyond our hunches and hypotheses and get some more data.
Great.
I've been also discovered that there's an acronym for pod. I'm not sure if the other pod users, like as you note, I think it's Shopify knew about this, but it is fairly relevant for kind of a point of delivery, but quite interesting. So yeah, and Sid will get that documented. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and considering that Zendesk refers to pods as point of delivery, that's probably where it comes from. So I think we should probably document it as the origin of the name.
Cool. Item number 6, as you saw, Fabian did also add Zendesk as another example.
That is so great. Thank you, Fabian. Really awesome.
And he also went through and added a number of slides on the Vitess approach, which could be an alternative to pods or used in conjunction, depending on how we want to architect this thing. But he's been doing a lot of diligence on understanding how Vitess works and thinking through what it could mean if we were to try to adapt it to Postgres.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple pros and cons missing. Like Vitess doesn't work with PostgreSQL, and it doesn't allow customers to specify a region. I think those should be included.
I think there is region support in Vitess somewhere. I'm not sure, Stan, if you know. I'm not sure if it's
call it out, but if you were to do regions with the database, you could, it could support regions. In other words, like it could say customer wants their data to be on this region, we map that region to a shard, data goes there, right? But there's other stuff that also has to be considered.
Okay,
yeah,
that's interesting. Can we include a link to whatever documentation there is about that? Because that changes the game considerably. I think the region functionality is a must-have in our future. If we can do that with Vitess, that is a game changer.
Yeah, there's a link to the docs there. I'm not sure, Stan, if that's the set of docs you're referring to, but under 7A21, we'll get that added as well.
Is that the slide deck or the doc?
Sorry, the agenda. I put
Yeah,
the
okay,
pieces.
yeah, I'm reading that on 7. Because I'm just referring to, because I had put together a doc on Vitesse and I specifically talked about regions and say, well, it can support regions for that, but maybe we need to add that to the slide.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so maybe just link them.
If it does support that, I change my opinion and be supportive of Vitesse. I think rewriting in MySQL is probably easier than kind of trying to invent Vitesse ourselves. How does Vitesse work? Like if one part of the database goes down, does the whole thing go down, or is it only on migration? Okay.
No, it acts as like a proxy, right? So if you've got one database goes down, assuming there's going to be failover, it can say, okay, I know this node is, I need to talk to this node now, and I'll make it transparent to the application. So the application doesn't need to know that a failure happened. It will try to figure out and retry.
Okay. So suppose I have 10 database servers and one goes down and stays down for like an hour, only 10% of my customers are affected instead of 100%.
Hopefully, yeah, assuming that one database isn't the users table or something that's shared among all.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, then if it support regions, I'm flipping my opinion on Vitesse and I'm supportive. But let's figure that out.
Cool. We'll keep going on that. Let me just capture that. Cool. Sid, I put 8. I copied over 8 from the dedicated call earlier today, just to have a broader discussion here.
Yeah, feel free to verbalize.
Yeah, I was trying to just better understand your thoughts here on how you're thinking of utilizing dedicated. I kind of think of this as 2 ways. One is the sort of loosely federated model where you stand up additional instances and slowly work towards building or rebuilding the cross namespace workflows back. So you can have maybe OAuth as a common auth platform, then add cross instance search, and then add merge requests back in. And that's like one avenue of pursuing this, more of like an iteration strategy, perhaps. So that's kind of one model where we could start off pretty quickly. But the other one could be that your intent is to just utilize this to deploy every single GitLab deployed service will get deployed using the dedicated technology and stack that we're building. So I was curious, like,
yeah, the second
one of these,
one.
what you mean?
So everything that is like we got self-hosted and self-managed and GitLab managed, everything GitLab managed is operated through dedicated. And like how we would start this is at some point we have we add to GitLab.com the ability to select your region. And then the person who does that, they lose a bunch of functionality because we haven't made the interop functionality. So it only works with private projects. You cannot mention anything outside of the namespace, just a whole bunch of caveats. And then we move that project to a pod. And then over time, we add more and more functionality, more and more cross functionality. Maybe we say goodbye to some GitLab.com features and we start moving every one over into pods. Some of them will explicitly select it and some of them will select for them until we can deprecate the current GitLab.com infrastructure.
Got it. So I guess to replay that a little bit, you're thinking of both of these things. One is to utilize really to get everything onto the dedicated stack. So ideally GitLab.com and then ops and security and whatever else we're going to deploy, plus of course dedicated instances, but also to get started more quickly with regions and also pods, which is sort of also the first model here, which is sort of get started with the deployment, get people on it, and then slowly rebuild, if we can, the sort of more seamless experience you get on GitLab.com today.
Yep.
Is that
correct? Okay. And then the ops instance, for example, that might be run on the GitLab dedicated staging environment or something like that. So that if we have production go down of GitLab dedicated, we still have some way to operate the rest.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. I guess dedicated, like if dedicated goes down, you still have your instance. It just doesn't scale up or down, but that might be acceptable.
Yeah, this is interesting because I sort of think of like the loosely federated model of an iteration strategy towards pods, sort of like invert is the coming at it from a completely different path than say like the test model, where we implement the test and we get the sharding from there, where that would be kind of like a database level replacement for .com. And the workflows would all be the same. The user table will be the same and unified. Whereas with sort of the loosely federated model, we may have to get started with the unified auth model, but then once we get from there, we're kind of rebuilding things. We could do both.
Yeah, I don't know. This is pretty hard to think about, also because Vitesse suddenly came into play for me again.
Yeah. I think so. Taking Vitesse off the table, I do think it's a valid iteration strategy. It'll, to your point, it will have a very different user experience. It'll sort of start with a degraded user experience if you want anything cross namespace, which probably a lot of enterprise customers may not care about.
Yep.
But then the other option is to sort of slowly port workflows over into the sharded world. Or into the pod, so take away sharding of like the database sharding, but into the pod world, which could sit on top of a test. So we have CI sort of decomposed. We could make that work across namespaces, across in pods, and slowly do it that way. We could maybe have a section on iteration strategies here, which could talk through these things.
Yeah, we have at least 3 different paths that I hear you say. So it makes sense to have 3 slides so that we at least know what we're talking about. I agree with everything you said, and I can't figure out what's best.
Cool. Awesome. This is really, really worth discussing. I've just started a little bit on trying to make like the user-based service, which could be moot if we go with the tests as far as although actually if we go with pod still, we're fine there. But this tries to capture some of what we discussed last call on having like a home shard for users, and then sort of trying to use that to A, store the PII, but B, also track some of the assigned reviewer to-dos and other workflows that we need to have readily available. So sort of work in progress here. Said you have a comment you're typing.
Yeah, there's a user service and a shard lookup service. The shard lookup service is that to find the shard of a project.
Yeah, it's sort of more, we could probably combine these things, just call it a lookup service, probably more generally. But I was just thinking you might want to also look up based on other unique identifiers, project namespace, things like that.
Yeah, maybe call the lookup service. Also, I really propose we use pods because shard means like 16 things to say to people, including partitioning.
Yep, that's fair. Cool. Made the change.
And I would say we have a lookup service and a counting service. I think users are still going to live on a specific pod because like users want their data. With regions, you need to store user data at a specific place. So I think user service is probably not what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think I think based on our discussion last time is you have all the user data stored on like the home shard, which would be in a given region. And then in this service, you'd have just sort of the not hash, but lookup table of user identifier, which would be okay to be public, hopefully. And that could then point back.
I think maybe call it a shared data service, because it's like, as a user, I want my messages or something like that to live in a specific region. But I'm okay with like my handle and the shard that I use.
Yeah.
Cells.
Profile picture, things like that.
And then the lookup service is kind of the same. So that's also shared data. So I think you kind of have the shared data service, and it contains part of a user, part of a project.
Yeah, well, I'll further define this. It's sort of half-baked, but this is exactly the things we need to think through here. Oh, you got it.
Cool. Yeah, probably the shared data service needs a slide with what's in there.
Yep. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, I don't know. Stan was pushing for Vitesse, so that suddenly came a bit closer. Any ideas from you, Stan, how to elevate that?
Well, I guess he mentioned, the question is, do we do this in MySQL driven Postgres, right? And in my document, I talk about, like, I think switching MySQL will be painful. I mean, obviously, like Geo and other features like that depend on Postgres right now. So my take on it was that switching to MySQL was a non-starter for us, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's going to be annoying, but I think a lot of what we did with a lot of the reasons why we had to make a decision was scaling problems. And that's because we had everyone on the same database. Or maybe if you keep the database smaller, I think a lot of it was efficiency. So like, it's going to be less efficient if we go to MySQL, but that's okay. Doesn't mean it's the same code. We'd have to rewrite some code. All this cross-project stuff is also going to be annoying. So
yeah,
it's hard to. I think that the MySQL rewrite, my intuition is that that's a lot less work. Not that it's little work, but less. We'll see. But why were you pushing for Vitesse if you thought that rewrite was off the table, Stan?
well, I was pushing for Vitesse porting it to Postgres because I wasn't. I put reason in my document why switching to MySQL would be really, really difficult and painful. But obviously doing it in Postgres will also be difficult and painful. So
if I look at all the cool Vitesse features that like allows you to do stuff that's while online, it's like all super hardcore database stuff that doesn't port from MySQL to Postgres.
Well, the test people have said that they don't see any reason why it wouldn't work in Postgres. They obviously are not Postgres experts, but they did scope out, like, this is how we think it would work, and we're open to a fork. But obviously nobody's going to take that on without it's a significant commitment, right? It's a really company behind it.
Okay, cool. Well, let's keep both options open and maybe maybe describe them both a bit better. If I look at like the change log of Vitesse, I assume a lot of what they're doing doesn't have like an exact equivalent in Postgres. Like it would be new code you'd have to write.
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of the replication code is probably the trickiest stuff because they have ways of saying, hey, take all this data and copy it to the shard at the same time. So when you're ready, switch over to the new sharded model, right? So we need to do something like that in Postgres.
All that, that is like if I think like what is going to cause us more problems in production, I think that code is going to cause us more problems. I think that even if it was the same amount of work, I think that rewriting to MySQL would be, we'd know it will be easy to test when we make that work. Well, all the problems you get if you port Vitesse is kind of stuff you find out in production, which is much less fun.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, there's a trade-off. I mean, we got a lot of self-managed customers that I'm like, how are we going to switch? How would they switch over? And that was one a big cost.
Yeah, and also it doesn't mean per se we're going back to one database. It would probably mean supporting both databases.
I think we've all been here long enough, right, to remember MySQL support days.
Yeah, we didn't do so well supporting both.
Yeah. Cool. Well, lots of options that are all not fun, but let's document them and let's keep thinking about it. Appreciate the context.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.